Deal with. The BBC understands Kenya is unlikely to provide the assurances WADA is seeking regarding tackling doping in the sport and could face punishment. Our sports editor Dan Rowan travelled to Iten, the legendary home of Kenyan athletics, and was told doping is commonplace.
It's one of sport's most unique settings. Iten, nestled in the Rift Valley, home to Kenya's champions. For decades, this small town has provided a high-altitude training base to thousands of world-class athletes, many of whom have gone on to establish their country as the dominant force in distance running. Kenya's prowess was underlined at the World Championships in Beijing last year when it topped the medal table. 1,500-metre winner Asbel Kiprop claiming one of his team's 7 golds in the 1,500 metres. Back in Iten, he's now in training for the Rio Olympics, but doping has cast a shadow over his country's preparations. 40 Kenyan athletes have been banned for cheating in the last 5 years, and Kiprop told me of the damage it's doing.
It's a disgrace, especially to the sport and to ourselves as the champions. It's a disgrace to an hard-working athlete when one athlete is found having used performance-enhancing drugs.
This is why there's concern. The BBC's obtained previously unseen, secretly filmed footage of an athlete receiving an injection from a doctor. We cannot verify what the substance was, but the athlete, who doesn't want to be identified, told me it was a banned substance.
Have you used performance-enhancing drugs?
Yes, of course.
How many times?
Many times.
And why?
In Kenya, most people are using. So if you don't use, you just be training only.
In November, athletes staged a protest in Nairobi against the sport's leaders amid corruption allegations. This week, officials had to deny new accusations of extortion, but we spoke to another athlete who said he'd been blackmailed by members of the sport's governing body after he failed a drugs test.
They asked me for 500,000 shillings. I said I couldn't afford to pay, so they told me I'd receive a 2-year suspension.
The governing body said it couldn't comment as it's under investigation by the International Athletics Federation, but did ask those with information to come forward.
Kenya's now at serious risk of being dragged into the doping and corruption scandal in athletics. Another of the sport's powerhouse nations, Russia, has already been banned from international competition because of state-sponsored cheating, and now the spotlight is falling on Kenya.
The BBC's learned that Kenya's been set a deadline of today by the World Anti-Doping Agency, or WADA, to show it's making progress in the fight against cheating. But all the signs are that it will now be placed on a watch list of countries at risk of being in breach of WADA's rules.
But I think that is the biggest threat right now, that Kenya would be declared non-compliant should we not meet the expectations of the code.
And of course, any non-compliant country, the IOC does have the right in its rules to deny it access to the Olympics, for example.
Yes.
Yesterday, Kenya's top sports officials held last-ditch talks, agreeing the need for legislation and funding for a new national anti-doping agency to finally become operational.
We have started taking action. The president is behind it, the whole cabinet is behind it. This is taken at the highest level. So Kenya is serious, and the Kenyan athletes you'll see will be running clean.
In a country of limited resources, the temptation to take shortcuts is obvious, and the cost of educating and testing a major challenge. Authorities insist the cheating is not systemic, but at a time when sporting integrity is under scrutiny like never before, Kenya's in a race against time to prove it can win clean. Dan Rowan, BBC News, Nairobi.
Well, with me is Peter Musembi from